What can an employee do when they feel they are being discriminated against? What if an email was sent to the manager, but the response was, "It's all in your head"?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that we're seeing a lot of questions. I mean, I've said this many times in recent months, and we spend more time at the Human Rights Tribunal than we do in court these days. There are so many allegations of discrimination, of harassment. It really becomes a full-time job for most HR professionals. So what can an employee do? I mean, one thing that we always tell people is document everything. It's one thing to feel as though you're being discriminated against, but usually when you have that gut sense, there's a reason for it. It might be that you're being excluded from meetings that you used to be part of, or that you're being, work is being taken away from you and shifted to someone else, or you're not part of discussions or even the social activities, or there's just a different tone in the workplace. Whatever it is, there's usually a reason for it. Discrimination, by the way, could be different things here. It might mean, this might be more of a bullying situation where it's not based upon a human rights ground. It's not because the person is female or black or Jewish or whatever the case may be. It's not a human rights ground. It's just a matter of the fact that they're being shunned or excluded, which constitutes harassment, which can be a constructive dismissal. So either way, if you are now being shut out of things, then document everything. If it is a human rights issue, if you feel, and we've helped people in many situations where they say, it's very clear that all of the older workers are being pushed out, or all of the women are, none of the women get promotions, all the men do. And we've worked with clients to basically put together a case where it starts with a feeling, and we eventually start putting together documentation to show that, yes, there were 30 people that were, at the level where they might be promoted into management, and 5 were. And all 5 of them were men, whereas the other 25 were women in an extreme case. You're going to have to document something. And again, like I mentioned in a previous question, there's very rarely a smoking gun, and that doesn't matter because this is not a criminal prosecution. It doesn't have to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What you need is enough evidence to show that on a balance of probabilities, it's more likely than not that there was discrimination, either based on a human rights ground or just discrimination, which really constitutes bullying, which is also unlawful. Either way, the key is going to be what the evidence is. And if there is enough there to show a case, human rights tribunals and vice chairs are essentially the judges of the tribunals. They've been around long enough to usually be able to see discrimination even when there is no clear evidence. As long as there is sufficient evidence to warrant a finding, then there will be. The flip side of that is we often see people who are convinced that there is unlawful discrimination because they can't accept the fact that they perhaps were not the best candidate. And I've had people come to me and say, I didn't get this job, and I know I was perfectly qualified, so the only reason I can think of is that it was because of my gender, race, ethnicity, etc. And what I'll tell them in that case is, look, unless you've got more to go on than that, you really don't have a case. Because it's got to be more than there was a protected ground and the person didn't get the job. If you can prove there's a connection between those two things, that's when there's a breach of the Human Rights Code. Again, though, and this gets back to what I often say, but if you think you might need an employment lawyer, you probably do. If you really have that feeling, and if you can satisfy yourself that it's more than you just being upset that you either didn't get the job or something has changed, go see an employment lawyer. The worst thing that's going to happen is the employment lawyer is going to say, you know what, I don't think it's a viable case. And in that case, at least you'll have the peace of mind of knowing that you actually inquired and got some advice, as opposed to just wondering for the next 1 or 2 or 5 years as to whether you should have done something. So again, how do you know? Usually we know. So trust your gut on these things.